Victor.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode of Wiz Kids Forever. This is a special episode today because we're giving you instant reaction to the Wizards 2025 draft selections. Matter of fact, the draft is still going on. To give you a timestamp as I do for all of my episodes, today is Wednesday, June 25th, 2025, and the first round of the 2025 NBA draft has yet to conclude, but it has commenced, and the Wizards have made their selections, and I believe they made what I believe is to be their last pick of the night. So we're going to give you our instant reaction, our instant analysis on the two selections that the Wizards made today. But just to give you a recap over the draft for today and how my day has been, today just ultimately encapsulates what it means to be a Wizards fan. Today was the ultimate encapsulation of the ebbs and flows of being a Washington Wizards fan. And let me tell you what I mean by that. A couple of days ago, I did a video on Ace Bailey, projected consensus top 5 pick in this 2025 NBA draft, all but forcing his way to Washington, D.C. And I know I did that video a couple of days ago. Well, he has held true to form for the last since I recorded that video. He's held true to form since I recorded that video, and all of the reports and all of the news basically tied Ace Bailey to Washington being his preferred destination out of everybody. In my last video I did a couple of days ago, I know we were dwindling it down to 3 teams. It was like New Orleans, Brooklyn, and the Washington Wizards. Well, in the last couple of days, all the smoke towards Ace Bailey was leading to the Washington Wizards. Even the reports coming out today that his camp has made it be known that he didn't even want to go to Brooklyn or Charlotte or Utah. And then another reporter came out earlier today that Ace Bailey, even contrary to reports that he didn't work out with any teams, he actually had a secret workout with the Washington Wizards in Atlanta prior to today's draft. And with all that information and all that news that I just spewed, that bastard Danny Ainge still took Ace Bailey with the 5th overall pick, 1 pick prior to the Wizards selection. That bastard Danny Ainge. And I try to be as PG as possible on here on YouTube because I'm trying to keep the channel monetized. But I don't know another way to describe Danny Ainge. And I tweeted it out as soon as the Jazz selection was made. The pick was in for the Jazz, and Ace Bailey was deemed to be announced that pick. If we look back at it, Danny Ainge always been a hoe, bro. He always been a hoe. As a player, as a front office executive for the Boston Celtics, whether he was screwing, you name the franchise, he's always been a hoe. And I've never been a fan of Danny Ainge. I'm about to go back and watch some Michael Jordan highlights tonight to just watch him bust Danny Ainge's ass, just to get my get back for all the partakers that have partaken today, all the doings that have partaken today, due to fucking Danny Ainge, due to Danny Ainge. And the thing is, the reason that I got so tied to Ace, because if you were following us early in the draft coverage and early in draft season, when it was projected that we might end up with a top 3 pick, I wasn't super fond of selecting Ace with a top 3 overall pick. But the reason that I've grown fonder of Ace, and the reason why I got a little tied to him, I got a little emotionally connected. Is that okay to admit on the channel? I got a little emotionally connected and tied to Ace over the last couple of days because Ace brought something that we haven't seen in a while. Ace brought something that we haven't seen in a while, and that's a guy that wanted to come to Washington. Yeah, we seen it with Alex Sark last year, but it's different with a number 2 pick and a number 6 pick, right? Because there's only one destination that Alex Sark could have turned down last year, and that was Atlanta, which he ultimately did. But Ace Bailey being a consistent top 2 prospect out of high school, being a 5-star, being a guy that has been ranked high in this class for years. Not even this class, because he had to reclassify back into this class to just talk about and just put a spotlight on how young he is. But a guy has been at the top of his class and been a dominant basketball player all his life, wanting to come to Washington. I was like, yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy. Now, you heard reports about him wanting to come to Washington to take all the shots and all of that. Well, guess what? We've never had people wanting to come to Washington at all. So damn the reason why they wanted to come to Washington. If Ace Bailey's wanted to come to Washington and take 35 shots a game in his rookie year, guess what? I'm letting him do it. We're not expected to win anything anyway. We got to guarantee ourselves a bottom 3 pick or that pick or a bottom 3 record, or that pick might go to the New York Knicks next year. And with our lottery luck as Wizards fans, it's damn near a guarantee that if we don't end up with a bottom 3 pick, that pick is going to the New York Knicks. So I went and gave a damn if Ace Bailey shot 35 times in his rookie year on the way to us having a 8-74 record. Because this guy has the type of ceiling and the type of offensive talent. Damn what you've heard about him in these pre-draft talks and things of that nature. The things that Ace Bailey does really well, he maxes them out. Tough shot maker. Elite shooter. And before we get into the pick that the Wizards actually made, because this isn't going to be a somber recording, because I actually think we got a hell of a player with the 6th overall pick anyway. I just want to show y'all what Danny Ainge did to Ace Bailey. This is supposed to be the happiest day of Ace Bailey's life, but he looked like he in the set of Get Out. He about to be balling with the Mormons. Shout out to the Mormons. No shade to y'all. But is this a guy that looks like he want to be playing in Salt Lake City? Is this a guy that looks like he wanted to be playing in Utah? And I hate that they had to spotlight his face like that, because you know them fans in Utah can't wait for him to have a bad game, so they could drop every racial slur in the book. I'm not even gonna repeat it, none of them. We keeping it PG over here. But you know how they get down to Utah. Ask Russell Westbrook. And I just hate this for Ace. But Danny Ainge, a part of the good old boys club, guy that's been entrenched in the NBA since prehistoric time, since dinosaurs were around. He don't give a damn. He'll be damned if Ace was going to set up his future, if Ace was going to determine where he started out his NBA career. Danny Ainge will be damned. That bastard Danny Ainge. And like I said, I mentioned it in this video and I mentioned it the other day. Another reason why I was so tied to Ace is because he brings a lot of the offensive creativity and imagination that I think that we lack with the with the Wizards. Even though I love where our roster is, we got a lot of people that play within a system and don't play with a lot of flow. Well, the player that they selected with the 6th overall pick, missing out on Ace Bailey, checks all the boxes of what I just listed off as an offensive hub, as a scoring hub, as a player that plays with a lot of imagination and a lot of creativity on the offensive end. And the player that I'm talking about is 6'6" guard out of the University of Texas, Trey Johnson. I love the Trey Johnson pick. I'm not even going to lie. It took me a little bit to get over missing out on Ace Bailey. I told you I still got to go watch some Michael Jordan highlights just to get my get back, just to get my ends. But that somber feeling, that frown turned upside down into a smile quite fast when Adam Silver ran up to that podium and said, with the 6th overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft, the Washington Wizards select Trey Johnson, the leading scorer out of the SEC. This is the guy with as a 6'6" guard. I'm curious to see the pairing of him and Bub in the backcourt. As I told you when I recapped the Jordan Poole trade yesterday, please don't tell me that CJ McCollum is going to be in the starting five. I'm curious to see the Trey Johnson and Bub Carrington fitting. But Trey Johnson is a guy who I believe is the best shooter in the draft, and not only the best shooter in the draft, but the best bucket getter in the draft. Like I said, he was the leading scorer in the SEC. And I don't know if you know, but technically speaking, the SEC in 2024, college basketball, was the greatest conference of all time. They had the most teams out of any conference in college basketball history make the NCAA tournament. And Trey Johnson led that conference in scoring as a freshman. We saw the offensive explosions, like the 39 points against Arkansas, like the 34 points against Kentucky, like the 30 points against Texas A&M. And if you're not familiar with Trey Johnson's game, you're going to get acclimated real quick. You're going to get acclimated real quick because if you like buckets, Trey Johnson is your guy. Trey Johnson is your guy. When I did a favorites prospects for Washington to be selecting at 6 video about a week ago, Trey Johnson was all over that video. He's the guy that I talked about all up and down that video because of what he can do on the offensive end. He's somebody that we desperately need. We had 2 16-game losing streaks this year. And in the midst of those 16-game losing streaks, there were games where we barely cracked 90 points. So this team is in dire need of a bucket getter like Trey Johnson. Because like I said, he scores any which way. He's not just a shooter, but he can get buckets as well. I believe that his profile checks out similarly to Bradley Beal coming out of the University of Florida. Now, I know he didn't look like it in his last couple of years in Washington, but if we can remember Bradley Beal coming out in the 2012 draft, people were talking about how he was the best shooter in that class. And early in his career, when he was getting spoon-fed by John Wall, Bradley Beal looked like the makings of an elite shooter. So if Trey Johnson can max that out and reach that ceiling, the sky's the limit. Because I already think that he gives you more as a prospect scoring at all 3 levels than Bradley Beal ever did coming out of Florida. As I mentioned in that video about the favorites being selected at 6, I believe that Trey Johnson has some capability to be the lead guard on the championship team. The lead guard. The lead guard. The one. The point guard. Yes, I said it, and I might be crazy. When you hear all these Devin Booker comps, these Bradley Beal comps, these Ray Allen comps, none of those guys play point guard. And I told you I try to run away from it, but I can't seem to shake the Washington Wizards, the OKC Thunder parallels. And you know who also doesn't have a traditional point guard? The OKC Thunder and the MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I don't need you to be a traditional point guard if you're going to be an MVP. We can see in that closeout game this past, Sunday, a couple of days ago. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 12 assists. So even though we know him as a scorer and the leading scorer in the NBA, he's still capable of getting it done as a playmaker. That's why the OKC offense is able to flow like it does. Because he's not over there just jacking shots up. And he's still capable of getting his 30 points a game. At his peak, I think that Trey Johnson has that type of offensive firepower. No, I'm not comparing him to SGA. But if we're running parallels to the OKC rebuild with our current Washington Wizards, I think Trey Johnson has the capabilities of being the SGA for the Washington Wizards. He has the scoring prowess, as I mentioned in that video. I love the way that he plays off the bump. He plays off the bump better than anybody in this class. Something that Shai does better than anybody in the world. Now, where the gap is between him and Shai, no, I'm not comparing him to Shai. I'm just running with these parallels. Where the gap is like Shai got 1,000,001 counters. As of right now, Trey Johnson got about 2. So if he can develop his counter game and give me more as a facilitator and a play initiator, the sky's the limit for Trey Johnson. The sky's the limit for Trey Johnson. Yeah, he might not give you Ace Bailey type ceiling, but Ace Bailey got to max out that ceiling. I still had some questions about Ace Bailey. And whether he's going to reach the peak of his powers was one of my biggest questions. I think Trey Johnson is more likely to max out his skill set than Ace Bailey is. Even if Ace Bailey's skill set at his peak might be a tad bit higher. I love the selection of Trey Johnson at the 6th overall pick. I love it. Because to be quite honest, and I'm being honest with myself, even though I was upset with the Jazz selecting Ace Bailey, after the draft lottery last month, about 6-7 weeks ago, when that draft lottery initially concluded, Trey Johnson was the first name out of my mouth for who I said I wanted with the 6th overall pick. Because there wasn't a thought of Ace Bailey being available at 6 overall then. So I can't scoff and turn my nose up at the draft selection of Trey Johnson now. That it actually happened. I'm ecstatic. Not only is he a bucket getter, but he's the best shooter in the class. Excuse me. I don't want to hear that Con Knipple bullshit. Trey Johnson is a better shooter than Con Knipple. They shoot catch and shoot just about the same. And then Trey Johnson laps him as a movement shooter and a shooter off the dribble. And as I said, if he can develop some of the playmaking prowess that I think that he can get to, if he's developed right, oh my God, we got to steal with the 6th overall pick. This is a 6'6" guard with a 6'10" wingspan. Who's those measurables sound like to you? A little Shea, a little SGA, a little Stephon Castle. So if we get that type of prospect with the 6th overall pick, we got to be over the moon. We have to be over the moon. Because at his peak, like I said, I think he can be the offensive hub for a championship level team at his peak. And at 19 years old, he fits the timeline with the rest of this young core. My only question and the only thing I'm skeptical about, I think I mentioned it a little bit a couple of minutes ago. I'm curious to see how a Bub Carrington and a Trey Johnson backcourt matches up defensively. Who guards the ones in those scenarios? Who guards the twos in those scenarios? Bub has some positional size if he is guarding the ones. Wouldn't necessarily say Trey Johnson has positional size of 6'6" guarding twos, but it's not like he's lacking in height. Might be lacking in weight right now. That's one thing that he can get better at. Is just simply getting stronger. Because that's going to not only develop his defensive end, but it's going to develop the offensive game even more. For him to be an even more prolific bucket getter than he already is. So as you see, I'm super ecstatic about the Trey Johnson pick. If I had to give it a grade, I'm going A+. And yeah, I might have the red and blue lenses on. I might have my red, blue, and white lenses on. But guess what? The vibes is high in Washington right now. But that wasn't it. That was not it. Because going into the draft, the Wizards were projected to not only select at 16, but they were projected to select at 18 as well. Well, that didn't happen because that mover and shaker, Will Dawkins, that bad man, he was back in the front office. I think they have a headquarters at the Wharf right now. He was at 12 stories cooking up. And he traded back from 18 with the Utah Jazz to recoup picks 21, 43, and some future seconds. 2 future seconds that'll be named, in the future that have yet to be named. The first thing that screamed out to me when I heard this trade is there's somebody in the second round that the Wizards wanted to get back into the second round for. If we can remember, they traded the 40th overall pick in the Jordan Poole trade to New Orleans yesterday. So they recouped some second round capital. And with that 21st pick, moving back 3 slots, they selected wing Will Riley out of the University of Illinois. 6'9" bucket getter. He won Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year. And while I'm not super familiar, I watched some Big Ten basketball, but I didn't really go in depth in scouting Will Riley. But just off of my initial impressions off watching him in real time, watching him during the season playing Big Ten, playing in the Big Ten conference and things of that nature. To me, in relation to the Washington Wizards, he screams a Keyshawn George clone to me. He screams a Keyshawn George clone to me. Their measurables are pretty close as far as the height. Will Riley suffers from a little T-Rex arm syndrome, with him having about a 6'8" wingspan with a 6'9" height. He's not an uber athlete, neither is Keyshawn, but they have and they track as prospects. If we can think of Keyshawn, if we can think about Keyshawn coming out of the University of Miami, while his shooting split numbers weren't amazing, with the form and the way that he ended the season, you can see that there was some meat on the bone, to improve as a shooter. And I think the same things can be said for Will Riley. He's got to average nearly 13 points in a little over 20 minutes a game in the Big Ten. He's from Canada, so he spent time in Canada, so he's international, just like Keyshawn. He just screams. I know this might be a little lazy, but he screams like Keyshawn George clone to me. I don't necessarily love the pick because of that redundancy. He isn't somebody where I think that he's ever going to be in the starting 5 for a championship contending type team, which, that'll be a hell of a pick with the 21st overall selection. But if he can be a contributor, a solid rotational piece, at least through his first contract with this team, it's a solid pick. It's a solid pick. I'm not going to necessarily grade it an A or a B, though, because I would have loved to take Ace Anul, big from the University of Georgia there. And he went 2 spots later with the 23rd overall pick. Because if you walked away from this draft with Trey Johnson and Ace Anul, I don't know how I could have gave anything lower than an A. I don't know how I could have gave this draft anything lower than an A. But I'm not going to knock the Will Riley pick. We're going to see. We're going to see. And the biggest reason why I'm not going to knock the Will Riley pick is because it's clear as day that Will Dawkins' draft philosophy for the 2025 draft was about buckets, baby. We getting buckets, baby. We getting bucket getters. He was tired of not seeing this team crack 90 points, even though playing with one of the fastest paces in the NBA as well. He was tired of seeing this team do a lot of cardio, as was I. As was I. And one last note that I found interesting before we head on out of here. Trey Johnson, when talking to the media, said that Will Dawkins, on his visit, actually showed him clips of taking off plays during his time when he visited D.C. It stuck out with him, and it motivated him to be great. So look at Will Dawkins. Look like he knows all the strings to pull. It looks like him and Trey Johnson potentially built a bond during Trey's time here. And it looks as if this front office and his coaching staff is determined to see Trey Johnson reach his peak. They know how important of a draft selection Trey Johnson was to this rebuild. And the wheels are down now. The wheels are down. It's time to put our foot forward and get to rocking. Hopefully, I'm talking about a Larry O'Brien trophy in 3 years. Is that a little ambitious? 3 years? But that'll do it for this episode, man. As always, if you're listening to us on audio-only platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating, a review. That's how we finesse these algorithms so that when you're searching anything Wiz Kids Forever or anything Washington Wizards Wiz Kids Forever is that #1 content hub that pops up in your search bar. If you're listening to us on YouTube, be sure to comment, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe. You see we pushing out that Wizard content more and more. So make sure you're not missing anything. And let me know how you feel about our selections in the draft. Infiltrate those comments. I'll reply back. I love chopping it up with you guys in the comment sections. But the Wizards leave out the first round of the 2025 NBA draft with guard Trey Johnson and wing Will Riley. How we feeling? I'm super excited. We got a pick in round 2 tomorrow, so I can't wait. I can't wait for round 2, and I'll check in on y'all on the flip side. Peace.